So this morning I want to look at three costs. What does it cost Ruth? What does it cost Boaz? And what does it cost Jesus, our ultimate kinsman redeemer? So what does it cost Ruth? Well, the first cost to Ruth is real and immediate. It is all about getting food on the table and a roof above her head. And we see that in the end of chapter 2 verse 23 that Ruth has been gleaning in Boaz's field throughout the whole of harvest. And it's all well and good having a man of standing to provide and protect for you. But what about when the harvest finishes? This is not a long-term solution. And as the harvest time comes to an end, we're left with the question, what will become of Ruth and Naomi? Well, we find that Naomi has a plan. In verse 3 and 4 of chapter 3, she tells Ruth to wash, to put perfume on, to wear the best dress, basically to make herself as attractive as possible, and to go down to the threshing floor. And when Boaz goes to sleep, she's to go and lie next to him and uncover his feet. But why does Naomi say this? Well, we actually find the answer in verse 1. One day, Ruth, mother-in-law Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be provided for." You know, Naomi hasn't forgotten her promise from chapter 1 verse 9, where she said that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Naomi's aim is clear. Her aim is to win a husband for Ruth who will be good and godly, who will provide and protect her, who will give her a future and will also preserve the family line. So we see here that the cost for her, for Ruth, the cost for Ruth in following Naomi is that she has left her home, her family, her gods, to follow her mother-in-law Naomi to a land where she is a foreigner, to a people she doesn't know, a land she doesn't know, and she's chosen to follow Naomi's God. And in doing so, she's turned her back, and it appears that she's turned her back on any chance of having a home, having a husband, having a family. So Ruth does as Naomi tells her, and she goes down to the threshing floor, and you know, there is a real cost, potential cost to these actions, and it all hinges on how will Boaz react. And there's real risk here. After all, she's going down to the threshing floor. She's going down at night, in the dark, to the threshing floor, to a group of men who are off duty. And she's doing this in a time of the Judges, a time where it says at the end of Judges in chapter 21 verse 25, it says that it was a time where every man did as he saw fit. A time where powerful men could take advantage of a young foreigner with no rights, and they wouldn't be held account for their actions. And we see here that Boaz, being an honourable man, could misinterpret her approach. He could send her away in disgrace. If they are seen together, they could be exposed to shame within the community. Yet Ruth is willing to abandon all security, everything that she has put her trust and hope in. She is prepared to abandon it all. She puts her trust in Boaz's character, that he will be the man of standing she believes him to be, that he will do the right thing, that he will redeem her and protect her and provide for her. And why is Ruth so willing to take this risk? Why is she prepared to pay such a high cost? Well, she's putting her trust in God's promises that he will provide for his people. Basically, she is trusting that Boaz will do the right thing, that as the kinsman redeemer, that he will redeem her. And we see here that Ruth asks him in verse 11, she says this. She says that, asks him to spread his garment over her, to spread the corner of his garment over her. And this same word is used earlier in the book of Ruth. It's actually used in Ruth 2 verse 22. And it's actually translated as wing, and it's where Boaz says, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wing you have come to take refuge." It's in that moment in chapter 2 where Boaz acknowledges that Ruth, in her faith, has shown kindness, staying with Naomi, and has come under God's wing of refuge. And basically, Ruth here is asking Boaz to pay an even greater cost than he already has. He's asking him to pay a greater cost than just allowing her to glean in his fields. She's asking him to provide and protect her long term, to take her in marriage. And not only to marry her, but to raise their firstborn son to be an heir in the line of Elimelech, to be a line in Naomi's late husband and her, Ruth's own late husband. So there was a real cost for Ruth, a risk, that she risked everything to go to Boaz, trusting that he would be the man of standing that she believed that he is. But what about the cost for Boaz? We're told that Boaz is in good spirits. He's enjoyed a good meal. He's had a few drinks. It's the end of harvest. They've brought in everything. The hard work has been done. And he goes down and lays his head to sleep. But suddenly he's startled in the night as he finds, verse 8, that there is a woman lying at his feet. He discovers that it is Ruth, and she asks him to spread his wing of protection and provision over her, to redeem her and to marry her. And he replies with this in verse 10. He says, "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "The kindness is greater than which you showed earlier. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor." Actually, Boaz's response reveals another cost that Ruth has borne. At first glance, we might just think that this is an older man, just being really pleased that a younger woman, a much younger woman, has expressed her affections for him. But actually, the kindness that he's speaking of, that Ruth is showing, isn't actually to Boaz. It is to her mother-in-law, Ruth. That's why he says, this kindness is greater than that which she had shown earlier. The kindness that Ruth has shown earlier is to leave her homeland, her family, and to follow Naomi. And here, what she's doing is, because actually Ruth could have gone after younger men, but if she had done that, these men would have been under no obligation to continue the line of Elimelech. So by not following them, she's left herself available for Boaz, a kinsman redeemer. And what she's showing here is that what she declared to Naomi in chapter 1, verse 16, your people will be my people and your God will be my God. She's showing in the most extraordinary way that she is fully committed and will fulfill the promise that she has made to Naomi. That Naomi will have an heir, that the line of Elimelech will be maintained. So at this point in the story, Ruth has gone all in. She's laid everything on the table and she waits for Boaz's response. And we find it here in verse 11 where it says, "And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you have asked." Boaz is prepared to pay the full cost. However, there's an issue. And we're left in chapter 3 on a bit of a cliffhanger as Boaz reveals that there is another that is before him, another kinsman redeemer. And we're left with him saying to Ruth that if this kinsman is willing to redeem her, then so be it. But if he is not, then she is to be assured that Boaz will. And then we come to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is all about the meeting between Boaz and this other guardian redeemer. Boaz tells him that Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling a piece of land that belongs to our relative Elimelech. And this kinsman redeemer, this guardian redeemer, he likes this deal. He likes this deal. It looks good to him. He likes this deal of an older widow with no heir and land. And it seems to him a no-brainer, so he says yes. But then Boaz goes on in chapter 5, in verse 5 of chapter 4, he says, "Then Boaz said, on that day that you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." And suddenly this deal doesn't look so appealing. The cost is not only the aging Naomi, but a young widow, Ruth, as well. Not only that, but the firstborn child will be counted as Elimelech's. It will be an heir and it will inherit Elimelech's land in Bethlehem. And he responds as this. He says, "At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." So why does the writer of Ruth include these details? It's because they want us to realise the great cost to Boaz in redeeming Naomi and Ruth. Wants us to understand that Boaz will take on the responsibility of providing for Naomi and Ruth, will take on the responsibility for their firstborn child and for all subsequent children. He will do all of this knowing that that firstborn child will be counted to Elimelech, that firstborn child will inherit the land of Elimelech's in Bethlehem. And so we see that Boaz is prepared to pay whatever the cost is. He's prepared to pay such a high cost to redeem Ruth. And our verses end in chapter 4 with blessings, 3 blessings being spoken over Ruth, over Boaz, and over their future family. So that's the cost for Ruth and for Boaz. But what does this tell us about the cost of the ultimate kinsman redeemer, the ultimate redeemer, Jesus? Well, you see, Boaz is like a shadow. He points towards Jesus. And we found out last week that the word redeemer means to buy back. So maybe the question we should be asking is, what has Jesus bought back? The Bible tells us that we have all sinned, everybody. And sin is the word that the Bible uses that basically is when we live life our own way, when we do things our own way instead of God's way. And it says that sin is a debt. It is a debt to us, and it is a debt that we cannot repay. But the amazing good news of the Christian faith is we find that the debt has already been paid for us, and it has been paid in full. It has cost us nothing, but it has cost God everything. You see, God sent his one and only Son, Jesus, down to this earth, where he lived a perfect life. He then died on a cross, and on that cross, he dealt with all of the sin of the world. Mine, yours, everybody's. But he didn't just die on that cross. 3 days later, he came back to life. He rose again. So he not only defeated sin, but death itself. And what that means is that those who choose to follow and believe in God, that they can live not only this life, but the life to come, when we'll be with him in heaven for eternity. We can live this life with him and for him. Just like Boaz was willing to pay the full cost for Ruth, this story tells us and reminds us that God was willing to pay the full cost for us by Jesus dying on the cross. God offers us, each one of us, a chance to exchange the bitterness and emptiness that we find in chapter 1 of Ruth, that life was just bitter and empty, and we can exchange it for joy and fullness. The joy and fullness that comes from having our sins forgiven and from coming back into a relationship with God. So if you don't yet know Jesus and you want to, know that God's answer to you is the same as Boaz is to Ruth. And as you ask him to redeem you and to forgive you and to come into your life, he says this. He says, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you have asked. If you're a follower of Jesus, these verses are to remind us and draw us again to just wonder at the depth and the richness of all that God has done for us through his Son Jesus on the cross. And if you would like to follow Jesus this morning, I just want to encourage you to come into the welcome room. We'd love to pray with you and just to talk to you a little bit and support you about what it looks like to follow Jesus. So let's just take a few minutes just to reflect on all that God has done for us on the cross.